Hey everyone, Jen Rice here. I wanted to share some musings that I've been having on this idea of personal development and personal growth. I've been thinking a lot about Robert Kegan's model that he calls the evolution of the self. And I've been thinking about this because as I've been identifying where my sweet spot is, where my superpowers are best used, it's in this idea of transitions. I've been through many of them, including the ones in this model. So as I was thinking about my own take on it, I ran across this one. Actually, I've used this in the past, but it popped up in 2 different Zoom calls this week, so it's been a little bit of top of mind. So you may be familiar with this idea of divergence and convergence. If you're not, just bear with me. This idea is often used in innovation practice. So if we want to create something new, we first start diverging. We get out of our own way of seeing the world and we start getting insights and ideas from a variety of places. The more unexpected, the better. And then at some point we have to stop gathering up ideas and we need to converge into something, right? And this dynamic happens in most areas of life. There's this divergence and diversity. If it goes on too long, we get chaos. At some point, we need to converge. But if there's too much convergence, things get fixed and stuck. We're closed off to opportunities. We're closed off to possibilities. So this happens within organizations, it happens in bigger natural systems, and it certainly happens in personal development. So what I've realized as I think through my own personal transitions, that I have used this all the time. So before I talk about that combination, let me talk a bit more about Robert's model. Essentially what he posits is that we've evolved out of childhood and we will evolve up into one of these four types. We've got self-sovereign. Self-sovereign is I'm an independent person, but it's a very fixed sense of self, very black and white. There's no shades of gray, very married to their own opinions. And I was thinking this may actually shed a little bit of light on the current political divide right now, but I'm not going to go too much more deeply into that. So maybe 10% of the population is in this idea, this category of self-sovereign. The next evolution of this is the socialized mind. About 30% of people are allowing other people essentially to define their own sense of self. And this actually feels a little low to me. There's so many times when you go through, let's take a midlife crisis, like I have gone through probably 3 times now, where suddenly you wake up one day and you're like, who am I? Whose life have I been living? Because I was living according to shoulds and expectations and trying to fit in. As an only child military brat, that was my survival mechanism. Who do I need to be in order to fit in this new school? What do I need to wear? Became quite the chameleon. I spent most of my life in socialized mind. But many people who are now getting divorced after a 20-year marriage is suddenly kind of stepping out going, well, who am I now? And then there's this transition. And there's this transition to self-authoring. And this is where we step into our own identity. We kind of author our own life. And I think there's still many stages within self-authoring. I think there's many people that I can think of who are very much their own person and yet still kind of searching, still haven't quite figured out where their place is in life. So about 50% of the population sits here. And then ultimately, if we're all lucky, we evolve up into self-transforming mind. And that's about 10% of the population, so not many, 1 out of 10. And the difference between the two is that self-authoring is still very self-focused. So in a self-authoring world, we've set our vision, we have our values, we move forward according to the constraints that fit our identity, and we can be fairly fixed in that. When we move to self-transforming, we're able to see multiple perspectives, hold multiple perspectives. Our container gets fairly large. We're able to see the both and, step in someone else's shoes and see a situation from their angles. So as we start thinking about all these transitions, and as we start evolving and growing, we can use this model. So I've noticed myself doing this all the time in hindsight. I'm actually still in the middle of this process, coming out of my wandering the world. So I had spent, a good 5-6 years really immersed in self-authoring, throwing away what was not working for me, cutting my hair and putting on motorcycle boots and getting a tattoo, and all those kind of rebellious things that often happen in teenage years, I did in my late 40s. So, it's never too late. And I still wasn't done with all that. So I went on my journey of selling everything in the US and just wandering the world with a camera and a carry-on. And as part of this process, you start dropping fixed mind. You drop convergence. Like, you can't actually have an experience like that and still maintain a strong sense of self. I suppose you can. Personally, I chose not to do this because this was part of my own personal journey work. You open up to divergence. You open up to this idea that the world is so much bigger than the little bubble that we've been living in. We diverge and open up to possibilities. And then at a certain point, we have to converge, because this is really uncomfortable. I will say my brain is wired for divergence. I'm kind of neurodivergent, which means that I see details before the concept. Most brains see concept before the details. So I'm constantly in scanning mode. I'm constantly integrating new information and pulling it in. So it's hard for me to actually converge, because I very much have shiny object. I don't know if you're like this. Many so-called catalysts or change makers can really see all the possibilities, have a really hard time putting a stake in the ground. So I think I've crafted 3 different book proposals, and then as I research, I find all these new ideas, and I'm off onto something else. So it's really important to, as you're going through this divergence process, to then converge and come back and integrate and consolidate all of these insights that you've received. And at some point, you kind of have to stop the new information. And this is something that I've had to do recently. It's like too much. I'm kind of in process overload. Let me just sit and integrate and feel into my body, into what is just authentically me. And I've been doing this process over and over, and I've been guiding other people in this process, kind of their own dark nights of the soul, if you will, which is the transition. I call it the hallway. All the possibilities, the doors. You've left that room, shut the door, and there's all these other possibilities that you could open up into. And at some point, we have to make a decision and choose a door and walk through it and commit. So it's this process of getting new ideas, converging, getting new ideas, converging, that happen at every one of these stages, and often multiple times in the self-authoring stage. We can know who we are and still feel like, oh, there's still more out there. Still haven't quite found what I'm looking for, as the song goes. So the process that I've developed, actually, I've used this process for years in strategy. I didn't really have a name for it. I just did it intuitively, but now I'm applying it also to personal world, which is something I call Intent+Improv. So if you think about an improv theater, what happens is the actors don't just get up and start doing whatever they want to do, right? Because there would be no coherence. There needs to be, there needs to have a plot line, which is our convergence, right? A convergence is an example would be a film following a script, and somebody decided what everybody needs to do. Well, that's certainly not improv. But having no container, no framework is way too much divergence, and it would be really boring. So we need to find the happy medium. So in an improv theater setting, the actors will reach out to the audience and say, give me a person, give me a situation, give me a location. And then they'll basically riff off of those inputs, that constraint. So this is what I call Intent+Improv. That is this dance in between convergence and divergence. In order to make a transition, we may not know what we want to do. That may not at all be clear to us. But if we can essentially set somewhat of a convergence, like it's not here, it's not here, it's somewhere in the middle where we kind of know we're going north, but we don't know the exact route. And how I do this is based on how we want to feel. So in the business world, we can ask ourselves, how do our customers want to feel? Do they want to feel like a rebel? Do they want to feel creative? Do they want to feel safe and secure? Do they want to feel empowered to do things themselves? You can operationalize an emotion, and it also allows for all kinds of new, fresh ideas, products, experiences that spring up around that. You're essentially having convergence, but not too much. You're not overly married to, we are this kind of company. You're allowing the dance to happen. And then in our personal life, we can do the same thing. How do I want to feel? How I decided I wanted to feel is kind of based on the 12 core human needs from 30 years of researching what motivates people and what makes us buy stuff we don't need. And at the end of the day, I want to feel free and impactful and connected and expressive. There are no more than 4. And within this, we can do a dance. What does freedom plus expression look like? We can even personify that into archetypes and have some fun with it. Allow some improv to happen. And within this dance of, let's set the container, set the vision, it allows us to begin making these evolutions, making these transitions in our lives a little bit safer. Because what doesn't change? Everything in this world changes. What doesn't change? What doesn't change is what I call our motivational DNA, how we're wired. We're typically making decisions based on similar needs through our whole life. I was a rebel explorer when I was 7 years old, building forts out in the woods. Like, I have always been that person. So it's no surprise now that this is the kind of thing that lights me up. So we can look at our life narrative to start understanding like what the patterns are, and then start applying this idea of divergent to get new possibilities without overwhelming ourselves, without turning into chaos. It's kind of controlled chaos. Allowing those possibilities to emerge without getting overwhelmed. So if you're interested in this process, I'm doing this in one-on-one sessions, and we're also doing this in group coaching. So the same process of divergence and convergence in a group environment where we're essentially self-authoring. We're bringing more humanity into the workplace. Who am I as an authentic individual at work? Well, sometimes we need a safe space to play with that and practice with it, and practice different versions of ourselves, maybe in the same conversation. We call that Groundhog Day. So a lot of these ideas I think are very relevant no matter what stage you're in. But especially if you're going through a transition, you might give this a try. I'd love to hear in the comments what you think, if you've done anything like this in the past, and I'll continue to come to you with new ideas and musings, and ideally collaborate with you on what this means to you and how we can push this form of thinking forward.